Hello everyone, welcome back to a video on factoring. In today's video, we will discuss three main points. First is regarding the modus operandi of factoring. Second is regarding the merits of factoring. And third is regarding the demerits of factoring. So modus operandi of factoring means it is a mode of operation or the process of factoring. So now, first of all, let's see a graphical representation of the factoring process. The first thing that happens in the factoring process is the sale of goods. That is the first step. A particular selling firm sells a particular good or a quantity or an amount of goods to a particular customer. And that too, the sale is happening on a credit basis. So the first and foremost thing for a factoring to be done is a credit sale. Since it is a credit sale, the amount that is receivable from the customer stands as a receivables amount, or it is considered to be the receivables of the selling firm. Then what happens next? Already the selling firm has appointed a person or an institution or an agency known as factor. So upon this credit sale of goods to the customer, the selling firm, also known as the client firm, gives or transfers the invoice copy to the factor after and when the credit sales happens. So the factor receives the copy of the invoice. After receiving the copy of the invoice, the factor makes an advance payment to the selling firm or to the client firm. That means he or that particular organization or the financial institution who is known as the factor makes an advance payment of about 80% of the amount of invoice to the selling firm. Now the selling firm is very happy. The selling firm can use this particular amount for other business operations, and also they can concentrate on other areas of their business operations since the receivables will be handled by this particular factor. So the advance payment is made to the client. That's step number 3. And after a particular period of time, that is when the due date arrives, what happens? The customer pays the amount due to the selling firm, and that payment in this case will be made to the factor if the selling firm mentions it to the customer. So the selling firm will mention that the payment should be made to the factor in certain cases. In that particular case, the payment will be made directly to the factor, and after receiving this payment from the customer, the factor pays the remaining 20% of the invoice amount to the selling firm, along with mentioning certain interest and other charges. So this is the process of factoring, and this is a graphical presentation of factoring process. Now let's see some important points regarding the modus operandi of factoring. As I already mentioned, modus operandi of factoring or the factoring process is initiated by credit sales. And the main function of factor is to carry out the realization of credit sales. The factor collects the receivables in factoring process. Then the customers are instructed to make payment to the factor. The factor may give advance finance, and the final payment is made only after the payment from the customers are received. So these are the important points to be kept in mind while thinking about or discussing about the modus operandi of factoring. These are some of the process or the steps which are discussed in brief. The factor and the client here means the selling firm, enters into an agreement. That agreement will be a memorandum of understanding, that is MOU. And before entering into this agreement, the factor evaluates the creditworthiness of the customer or the buyer. And also the factor fixes a limit for the client, a limit regarding the percentage or the proportion of advance payment to be made. Secondly, the client sells the goods or services. That means the credit sales happens. Third, the client assigns the debt in the favor of the factor. The client notifies on the invoice a direction to the customer to pay the invoice value to the factor. 4. The client forwards the copy of the invoice to the factor. 5. The factor provides the credit to the client to the extent of 80% of the invoice value. And 6. Factor makes a follow-up periodically with the customer. And 7. When the customer pays the amount of the invoice finally, or when the final payment is made, the balance of 20% of the invoice value is passed to the client after recovering necessary interest and other charges. So I hope by now it's clear for you regarding the modus operandi of factoring. Now let's move to the discussion on some of the merits of factoring. In some cases, in some types of factoring, as well as certain merits to certain persons. The first merit is regarding the advance factoring. So in the case of advance factoring arrangements, the firm has an access to an additional source of finance. And that too, it is an additional source of short-term finance. So that they can use or the firm can utilize this particular additional source of finance as and when required. Then the second benefit or the second merit of factoring is to the firm. The firm enjoys a benefit from the factor. That benefit is in the form of the expertise of factor. The factor makes certain credit decisions with his expertise, and the firm can enjoy this benefit from a particular factor. Third one is regarding the financial benefit to the firms. A firm which has a larger number of accounts to be monitored and where the risk of default is rather high stands to benefit financially by factoring its receivables. So if the risk is very high for a particular firm and if they adopt factoring service, they may get a financial benefit in such case. Number 4, the client can concentrate on other areas of business, as I already mentioned. Since the receivables will be taken care of by the factor, the client can concentrate on the other areas of business, and also the firm can improve its efficiency because all the administration regarding the sales ledger, the credit control, all this comes under the responsibility of a factor. Next, the immediate and flexible finance provided in advance by the factor supports the growth and increase the liquid resources of the client. So this particular financing form is flexible in nature and it is immediately available. So it helps in the growth of the client. Factoring service also helps in the reduction of bad debts and also reduction in administrative expenses because the administrative expenses are reduced to the extent such that that particular responsibility is taken up by the factor. Then the factoring also enables the company to meet the seasonal demands for cash whenever required. And to speak about the merits of factoring, we'll just go through one or two more points. The seller will be in a better position to meet its commitments more promptly since they have improved cash flows, and also a better purchase planning is possible with this factoring service because the availability of cash helps the company to avail cash discounts on its purchases. So I hope you got an idea about the merits of factoring now. So the next topic deals with the demerits of factoring, by which we will end today's video. Regarding the demerits of factoring, first we have it is a costlier alternative. So, in the process of managing the receivables, factoring is considered to be a costlier alternative because in case of large firms, especially the large firms can manage their receivables and also can have access to cheaper sources of short-term credit. Thus, it becomes a costlier alternative in certain cases. The second main demerit of factoring is the sign of deterioration in the financial health for creditors. That means the creditors look upon the receivables as a source of future inflow, which will enable the firm to meet their maturing claims. But when the creditor feels that this particular firm gives the receivables management to a particular factor and they feel there is something fishy in that, so the firm or the creditor firm or the creditor may perceive that the firm must be experiencing some financial difficulties. That's why they are borrowing uh, some advance amount from the factor, or that's the reason why they are giving this receivables management to a particular factor or to a particular financial institution, etc. So it is a sign of deterioration in the financial health for the creditors. Third demerit is regarding it leads to the factoring leads to the overconfidence for the client. So the client feels an overconfidence which results in the overtrading or mismanagement in a particular form. And when in factoring there occurs certain fraudulent act, the fraudulent act may include pre-invoicing, duplicate invoicing, invoicing against non-existent goods, etc. And if such fraudulent acts are involved in the case of factoring, it increases the risk of factoring, or the risk element of factoring is increased. The next demerit of factoring is regarding the rights of factors. In case of factoring, the rights of factors are uncertain from the purchase of trade debts. Because in the case of bills of exchange, the rights of the parties involved are clearly mentioned and it is certain. But in case of factoring service, the rights of factors are uncertain. So thus we come to the end of the demerits of fact. Some of the small and the brief points on demerits of factoring. So I hope you have understood the different merits of factoring, the demerits of factoring, and also the modus operandi of factoring service. We'll meet in a new video on next day. Thank you.